Well, when we think of an online paedophile, we think of a guy, don't we, in a grubby Mac and probably very little else, sitting in front of his webcam. What we forget is actually those individuals are probably married to somebody. They may be living alone. They may be your neighbour. They may be the nice guy that you talk to at the bus stop. There really isn't anything that differentiates between your internet offender and everybody else, apart from the activity that they get up to online. We do pass paedophiles in the street all the time, and we don't bat an eyelid because they don't have a big sign on their head that says, "Hello, I'm a pervert." You know, they're perfectly ordinary people in many respects. They may be a little bit on the side of being a little bit loner-ish, a little bit geeky. The ones who take a lot of time on the internet tend to be the kind of geeky fantasists, but also they're the people who just function like you or I. In fact, internet child offenders, those who either go on to meet children or don't go on to meet children, it just stays online, tend to actually function a little bit better than a lot of the clients that I see. They're not people who are at the margins of society. There are people who are sitting at home and have got an internet and know how to use that internet. We're not talking about people who you can just immediately spot on the street because they're weirdos. It's a great problem for us as psychologists trying to work out actually who are the people who are content for online activity only, which can be damaging. You know, let's not forget that every time you download an image of a child being abused, there's a victim there, and every time you talk to a child over the internet in an inappropriate way, you're causing harm. But then, of course, we've got another group of people who will go on to try and meet up with a child and have hands-on contact with that child. It's very difficult to work out, well, who's who? Who do we need to be more worried about? Actually, all the research shows us that there's a huge group of men and women who will engage in fantasy behaviour, who will try and contact children over the internet, but not necessarily want to meet up with them. I've heard a statistic recently saying that 33% of the group of men who are convicted for downloading child pornography will have tried to have met a child at some point. Now, I actually think that that research was looking at men who had been convicted and sent to a group. Quite a lot of men are convicted of internet behaviours that are very unsavoury, but they don't necessarily get sent to a group. So I think that actually the percentage of people who are online, up to no good online, who actually want to meet a child is probably below about 20%. Working with sex offenders is very difficult, and obviously you have to take each one as an individual. Some of the people that I work with are actually very distressed by what they've done, and they want to gain some sort of control over their urges. They want to understand it better, and they want to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But there's also a group of offenders who actually are very entrenched in their beliefs, and they will say things to you like, well, she came on to me, she was 7, but she wanted to have sex with me. Or it's good for children, they need to learn about sexuality, so they may as well learn it at an early age, you know, with an adult that they can trust. They're very distorted in the way that they think. And when you meet somebody who has got a high level of what we call cognitive distortions, so lots of excuses and justifications and rationalisations for their behaviour, it's very, very difficult to treat. And sometimes, you know, a paedophile will think, well, actually, I'm loving this child. And what we can do is we can work with them and try and really get to the root of actually what emotions cause them to want to offend against a child, what kind of cycle of behaviour do they engage in, because obviously they've got to take various steps towards gaining access to a child, getting a child alone, getting a child to not tell its parents what's going on. And there's usually many different points there where we can intervene to say, look, this is when it's getting risky for you, and this is what you must do to avoid that or cope with it, and we'll help you to do that. If you can't do that by yourself, then we're going to step in. I think that there's bound to be a huge number of the general population who think, well, why don't we just lock them up and throw away the key? But the fact is that that doesn't happen. It's not practicable. So what we have to do is we have to look at it and be very sensible. Can we work with this individual and get them to learn about what triggers their offending, what takes them that step closer to offending? Because sex offences don't just happen, and they don't just happen overnight. Can they control themselves? Can we work with them to help them to control themselves? Some will be able to, and some won't. And for the ones that won't, we have to take an approach that is sensible, that is measured, but is very much about controlling that individual, being aware of what that individual is doing, and if necessary, stepping in to stop an offence from taking place. I have worked with many sex offenders, many men who've offended against children, and I would say that a proportion of them, maybe 25-30%, have gone on and have lived what we would call a normal life in the community with support and with monitoring. Others, I'm afraid, do go on to reoffend. They do get reconvicted, usually for a lesser offence, usually. But really, it's very difficult to say. Some will escalate in their offending. Of course, they're the ones that we pay the closest attention to. But there is no cure, there's only control. And if somebody's offended against a child once, then we're going to be monitoring them. We're going to be monitoring them for life.